Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why do we eat what we eat? Why are some traditions so widespread they feel ancient, even if they're barely 70 years old? Because sometimes, a tradition isn't born from culture, it's born from too much product. In this video, we're going to explore how culture is engineered to absorb surplus, when technology, policy, or innovation creates more than the market can handle. We'll break down how crawfish festivals were crafted to deal with an overflow of mudbugs from rice field irrigation, how orange juice at breakfast was invented by citrus marketers in the wake of oversupply, and how milk became a school lunch staple, not for your health but for the health of the dairy industry. And then we'll ask a deeper question. If these cultural habits were manufactured, what are we being sold today? From swamp critter to cultural icon, crawfish weren't always glamorous. In fact, before the 20th century, they were considered poor people's food. Mudbugs caught in ditches, bayous, and backwoods streams. They were consumed locally but held no economic significance. That changed with technological innovation in rice farming. By the 1940s and 50s, Louisiana rice farmers discovered that they could reuse their flooded rice fields in the off-season to raise crawfish, cheaply and in large volumes. This also helped fertilize and prepare the grounds for next season. With improved irrigation pumps, levee systems, and knowledge sharing from agricultural universities, crawfish yields exploded. But outside of Louisiana, no one really wanted them. There was no natural national market. So what do you do with tens of millions of pounds of tiny crustaceans that spoil quickly? You do what any good marketer would do. You create a reason for people to eat them. In 1960, Breaux Bridge declared itself the crawfish capital of the world, throwing its first annual festival to celebrate the industry. Local papers, cooking columns, and even school curriculums began to frame crawfish as a symbol of Cajun pride. By the 1980s, crawfish farming was bringing in over 50 million annually, and the once ignored mudbug had become the centerpiece of seasonal celebration. Surplus crawfish became a symbol of cultural identity because it had to. Next, the liquid lie of the American breakfast. Quick question. Why do you think Americans drink orange juice for breakfast? If you said vitamin C or it's just tradition, you're only half right. The real reason is marketing plus agricultural surplus. In the early 1900s, California and Florida's citrus industries exploded thanks to railroads, irrigation systems, and cold storage tech. Oranges flooded the market, and producers needed new ways to move fruit that would otherwise rot. Enter the California Fruit Growers Exchange, which would later become Sunkist. They launched massive campaigns linking orange juice to health, hygiene, and modern life. Full-page newspaper ads claimed that a glass of OJ could keep the doctor away. Doctors were paid to endorse it. Schools were supplied with oranges and juice to teach health. But that still wasn't enough. People weren't consuming enough oranges. So, in the 1940s, during World War II, the U.S. Army commissioned researchers to invent frozen orange juice concentrate, a way to preserve juice and send it overseas. Post-war, this technology was commercialized, and juice became more affordable and accessible than ever. Suddenly, orange juice wasn't just an option. It was an expectation at breakfast tables across America. What started as a storage solution became a daily ritual. The dairy industry's masterstroke, milk has long been a staple in the West, but its daily consumption at scale is a modern construct, driven more by economics than nutrition. Post-World War II, America had a new problem: too much milk. Advances in pasteurization, refrigeration, artificial insemination of cows, and feed efficiency meant that dairy farmers were producing more milk than ever. But per capita consumption wasn't keeping up. The federal government stepped in with programs like the National School Lunch Act, 1946, the Special Milk Program, 1955. These acts funneled millions in subsidies to schools on the condition they included milk in every meal. Schools had little choice. If they wanted federal funds, they served milk. Meanwhile, lobbyists pushed the USDA to embed slogans like "Milk builds strong bones" into curriculum and public health messaging. Whether or not that was universally true didn't matter. The surplus had to go somewhere. Even today, over 6 billion pounds of milk are still bought by the US government every year to support prices, much of it ending up in school programs, food banks, or dumped when prices collapse. Milk became a childhood necessity, not because kids needed it, but because the dairy industry needed them. After that, we have A Love Story, written by De Beers. Think engagement rings have always included diamonds? Not even close. For most of history, engagement rings featured a variety of gemstones, or none at all. Diamonds were rare, expensive, and not particularly associated with love. That changed in the 1930s when the De Beers diamond cartel faced a crisis. A global economic downturn and oversupply from newly discovered diamond mines in South Africa meant prices and demand were plummeting. De Beers didn't just want to sell diamonds. They wanted to make not buying one feel wrong. So they hired N.W. Ayer & Son, a marketing firm that created one of the most influential campaigns in history. A diamond is forever. This slogan wasn't just poetic, it was psychological warfare. It associated diamonds with eternal love. It positioned them as a non-negotiable milestone in relationships. And crucially, it set the standard that a man should spend at least 1 to 2 months' salary on the ring. The result? By the 1950s, over 80% of American engagements involved a diamond ring, up from just 10% a generation earlier. This wasn't ancient tradition. It was brilliant surplus control through cultural engineering. Even today, people feel guilty for buying a non-diamond ring, or embarrassed if theirs is too small, a testament to how deeply embedded the marketing became. Lastly, jet-set culture. We take it for granted that flying is an aspirational experience. The freedom of the skies, exotic destinations, the business class upgrade, it all feels like a modern luxury dream. But that dream was largely manufactured in the 1980s. Why? Because the airline industry had too many seats, not enough passengers, and needed to create culture around flying to survive. Here's what happened. In 1978, the U.S. government passed the Airline Deregulation Act, which removed federal control over routes and pricing. This opened the door for price wars, new competition, and massive overcapacity. Suddenly, there were too many flights, too few flyers, and airlines hemorrhaging money. The solution? Turn air travel into a status symbol. American Airlines launched the first frequent flyer program in 1981. It wasn't just a discount gimmick, it was a behavioral engineering tool. It tied identity, loyalty, and prestige to the act of flying. Flying became more than travel. It became a badge of career success, a lifestyle aspiration, a reason to book flights you didn't even need. And behind it all was the need to fill empty planes. At the same time, airlines began to glamorize the jet set in ads, movies, and magazines, selling the idea that travel itself was a symbol of freedom, adventure, even moral virtue. We weren't just sold a ticket. We were sold a reason to want one. Do you see the Matrix? So now we've seen it over and over. Crawfish turned from mudbugs to cultural delicacy. Oranges became breakfast medicine. Milk got a seat at the school lunch table. Diamonds became a ritual of love, and flying became a symbol of elite freedom, all because surplus had to be solved, and culture was the tool to do it. These weren't organic evolutions. They were strategic adaptations to technological overproduction, economic inefficiency, or policy shifts. You're not just living in a culture. You're living in a story someone once wrote to sell something. You've been trained to think of them as cultural cornerstones, but behind each one is a pattern. Technological innovation creates surplus. The market can't absorb it. Culture is engineered to fix the gap. So ask yourself, what are we being sold today as essential? What rituals are we following that were written by industries, not communities? The answer might be in the protein shake you drink, the oat milk in your coffee, or the holiday you just celebrated with branded packaging and seasonal deals. Understanding how culture can be manufactured doesn't make you cynical. It makes you conscious. Because in a world of abundance, you're not just buying products, you're buying stories. And if you want to be sovereign in a consumer-driven age, you have to know who's writing those stories and why. Culture isn't always born from meaning. Sometimes it's born from inventory. What's one everyday habit you have that you think might have been engineered more than you realized? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to see what cultural glitches in the matrix you've noticed. Subscribe to unsubscribe from mediocrity.